Hello, human peoples. You're listening to the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. Support us and gain access to great exclusive podcasts like Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and our latest show, Spiel Boys. Head over to patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We do game streaming, movie nights with our patrons every Friday night, and you can even commission your own podcast about anything you want. Literally anything, within reason, and we have to do it. You are quite frankly out of excuses not to go visit patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
All you motherfuckers are gonna pay. You are the ones who are the ball lickers. We're gonna fuck your mothers while you watch and cry like little whiny bitches. We're gonna make them eat our shit, then shit out our shit, and then eat their shit that's made up of our shit that we made them eat. And then all you motherfuckers are next. Love, Jane, Silent Bob.
Welcome to Old Smith, New Smith, I believe this is called.
Yeah, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Without looking it up, I know the names of the podcast.
Without double checking, I will say this with supreme confidence.
Yeah. Brought to you by @NerdNumbers, our Patreon producer. Thank you so much, @NerdNumbers.
Thank you.
I made a little Italian. You can't see it. I made a little Italian hands when I said that. Just letting you know.
It's a me, a nerd numbers.
It's a me, a nerd of numbers. Listen, this is a podcast where we've been watching Kevin Smith films in two-part sections. We watch an old Kevin Smith film, and then we watch a new Kevin Smith film, and we compare the two. And we've been starting on the outside, moving in, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we started with like Clerks and the Jay and Silent Bob reboot because Clerks 3 didn't exist yet.
That's true. Very extremely true.
Yeah, we should talk about if we want to cover like a special ending of this to cover like almost like a we just watched for Clerks 3. I still haven't watched it.
Oh, you should.
Had the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Check that out.
But we're not on Clerks 3. We're on 1999's Dogma, which we will then pair with 2011? Yeah, 2011's Red State, which, fun matchup.
Yeah, I think it's going to connect in a lot of ways that we might not expect.
Yeah.
Possibly.
So we're going to talk. Yeah, we're going to just talk about Dogma, and then we'll talk about that, how we think it'll match up. Mm-hmm. Boy,
this
movie. I want to start. Sorry,
go ahead.
This movie is not online. Number one, this movie is not online. It's so 99.
I am not surprised.
Yep, and I have the good DVD of it, but it's in Massachusetts, so I quickly bought a version online, and boy, it's some real like 2001 bullshit where it's like a double-sided DVD where one side's full screen.
Oh yeah, I had that
and it's
one.
Like Jesus Christ.
That was because that was the first one that came out, and then they did the 2-disc special edition.
Yeah.
This, if you recall, Miramax didn't put this one out because they were they blinked in the face of all the controversy surrounding it because it's a movie about religion and specifically about, as the title suggests, about Catholic dogma and Catholicism, and it's a Kevin Smith movie, so it's loaded with dick and fart jokes. So there was a not quiet pushback to this film where a lot of people were clutching their pearls over it. Yeah, there were protests.
Kevin Smith joined the protests.
It begins with a disclaimer. This was actually put out by Lionsgate as opposed to Miramax, which had released all of his movies up to that point. This is only his fourth film. This is early enough in his career.
I know.
That all he had done before this was Clerks, Mallrats, and Chasing Amy.
Is that why it's not online? Because
I suspect it has something to do with the controversy.
Well, here's what I think. It's probably more legal bullshit. I saw a video that was Kevin Smith explains why Dogma isn't online, and I didn't click on it, and I should have.
You should have.
But I just didn't have time. I imagine, because the thing about the controversy is it is now very quaint.
It's extremely quaint. Like, this is such yeah, I mean, I don't know.
So I can't...
The current climate of America, I could see people eating themselves inside out over this fucking movie.
But I can't see any company not releasing it because of that. That's why my guess is it's like legal mumbo jumbo, where it's like,
well,
because
we don't need
of that controversy. Yeah, we don't have to speculate. But the disclaimer is very funny, by the way. The platypus stuff is very funny.
Yeah.
This is a 20-year-old film, and I want to start with that thought.
More than.
Yeah,
it's
more than.
Almost 25. This movie, Dave, this movie is almost a quarter century old.
Yep. And so this does feel like a Life of Brian, where you're like, this was controversial.
Yeah.
Like you can get why, but it's very funny that it's like
it is very Life of Brian is a perfect analogy. It is very Life of Brian. It is so. It's like it's offensive if you're like really trying to clutch your pearls, but like it's ultimately so harmless.
Yeah. Well,
and it's somebody who is a Catholic and who grew up Catholic, just poking fun at Catholicism, and it still lands on God is real, the message is real. So it's not like saying Catholicism is all bullshit. It's like it's specifically commenting on what the title suggests, Dogma, the belief structure that people have created around Catholicism.
Yeah. I would argue
where
this
Catholicism is the belief structure. You guys know what I meant. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. I would argue that this is actually one of the best appeals for religion. This is pro-religion.
It is. But
it humanizes the Bible. That's the big thing about it.
And it doesn't end on a point of you need to accept religion or else you're going to hell. It doesn't really end on that message. It ends with like
it's about a good idea.
Yeah, it's about a good idea. It's about believing in something to the extent that it enriches and supports your life and makes you a better, more fulfilled person and a kinder person, and none of the negative bullshit that goes with religion.
This movie isn't trying to make me religious. And
no,
it didn't.
Not at all. And it absolutely didn't
preaching.
For me.
But it humanizes the idea of it, like the lore behind it. Like the part where he talks about, like, can you imagine being a 12-year-old boy and told that you're the son of God? Like, those moments is what makes it for me, because they're taking religious figures and they're saying, but they're people. They're actually people.
They're human beings,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, and that's like the biggest asset of this movie. Mm-hmm. It is, again, going back to it's almost 25 years old, what strikes me about it is that this movie is progressive for its time. And it's so, again,
in a lot of ways,
kind of adorable.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, this is pre-gay marriage, right? Like, this is pre a lot of things, pre 9/11, and you can feel it because it's like, wow, like Chris Rock showing up and being like, Jesus was black, and they're like, oh no, and it's like, that feels like accepted information. Obviously not in every circle, but that's the sort of thing where it's like most people would go, yeah, he was probably Middle Eastern, right? Like,
yeah, I love the point that he makes too. He's like, people love the message of the Bible and Jesus, and then some people, right up until they find out he's a black person, and then they hate it. It's like, why is that the sticking point? So like, I do like that it. My biggest, I think the biggest hit against this movie is it's really just a series of conversations, but which I mean, like a lot. Let me be more specific. This is it's a movie about a character who's just traveling from one location to another to receive exposition, and that's the entire movie. It's really just a series of theological, not really thought experiments and not really debates, but just like theological dissertations, I'll say.
All right, so it's not trying to make you religious, but it is a little preachy, but not in the way you'd think. Where it's like Selma Hayek being like, the Bible's gender biased. It's a lot of that. It's a lot of every character has a take on the Bible.
Everybody has a take on the Bible, yeah.
Yeah, and most of those takes now are very quaint, I would argue.
Right, because this is
20-something years later.
This is a 23-year-old movie. So, like, these are ideas that are now almost rote,
mainstream.
Some of them. Yeah, extremely mainstream. But it was not the case when this movie came out.
Exactly. And as for the datedness of the humor, it's probably one of the more tame Kevin Smith ones. Jason Mewes Jay as a character is, of course, very misogynist. but like that's sort of the point
A little
of the
homophobic
character.
too.
A little homophobic, and yeah, there's a couple jokes that are homophobic. In a way, again, we've mentioned that Kevin Smith's brother is gay, which doesn't like mean he's allowed to be homophobic. You know what
but
I mean?
I think...
But it's to give a perspective of where he's coming from. Again, it's very of its time. With that.
Yeah, I think the other thing that we've talked about in previous episodes is it is of its time, and Kevin Smith has demonstrated both himself and with his movies that he's grown since then. Like he would not make the same
and he always
jokes
means
today.
well.
Yeah.
The Alanis Morissette being in this is actually very significant because Alanis Morissette plays God in this, and she actually had a beef with Kevin Smith before this about the misogyny. And I guess it was in a foreword she wrote a foreword to one of the Jay and Silent Bob comics that I read, and it's been a while. I wish I dug it up. That basically amounted to she sat and talked to Kevin Smith about it. And then once she understood where he was coming from with the character of Jay, she was like, oh, I'm on board. So, like, it's the sort of thing where Kevin Smith always means well. If you sit and you talk to him, he's, people have seen interviews and stuff. He's a very friendly guy who is always coming from the right place. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's like when you watch his movies, not everybody's going to like them, and they will, in fact, rub people the wrong way. But, like, they are coming from a place where he's trying. You know, he's trying to understand people and not punch down, essentially.
Yeah.
And so, like, there's homophobic jokes, but there's also, they constantly mention that, like, yeah, God likes gay people. Like, they do a thing where, like, one of the movie's executives disowned his gay son, and that's his sin. So they're saying, like, yeah, it still comes down to, like, fucking be nice to people, you know?
Yeah. Be kind and accepting, and yeah.
Exactly. That's part of what I like about how they depict God in this, is that it's like this prudish weird stuff like sex and LGBTQ people and like profanity. It's like, no, God wouldn't give a shit about that. Have you read the Bible? You know, like it's that where it's like, no, why would he care about like fucking Beavis and Butthead playing on TV, you know?
Yeah.
And so, like, it's a more grounded look at that, where it's like, again, it's about dogma. It's about, like, no, those were man-made limitations.
Yeah. Yeah, it's... I keep coming back to that. Like, I keep having to remind myself, this was a favorite movie of mine. Like, I loved this movie when it came out. I watched it a bunch on DVD, but I haven't revisited it in probably more than 10 years.
Really? Yeah, I guess me too.
Yeah. So watching it... Go ahead.
Oh, it's the first Kevin Smith movie I saw in theaters. I know that.
Same, yeah. I had to catch all the others on video before then.
Yeah.
Although I do remember when Chasing Amy came out. I mean, I remember when Clerks came out, because Clerks was a huge deal, and they had the standees all over Blockbuster and stuff. But Mallrats just passed me right by. I had no idea that movie existed. Until I saw, until I got into Clerks and Chasing Amy. But anyway, the point is it is funny to like watch this movie now and reflect on what a like not huge deal, but like, it got dropped by Miramax. That was a huge deal. Like they blinked in the face of all this controversy, and then it had to get picked up by Lionsgate, which was brand new at the time. And this picking up Dogma sort of solidified Lionsgate as like an actual studio that would like take chances on things. The movie they did right after this was American Psycho, which was another movie that no fucking distributor would touch. Like no studio would touch American Psycho. For good reason.
I get it.
And then, of course, when you watch American Psycho, like all the violence is off screen, and it's this very smart, intelligent, sharp satire, and it's not at all what you would think it is. But so it's like the same thing with this movie, where when you actually sit down and watch the movie, like within its own context, it's like so mild, like
even for the time it came out.
For the time it came out, yeah. And like watching it now, like you said, it's extremely quaint.
Yeah,
it's just like, yeah, this is like basic conversations that people have about religion now, like, but it is. I need to remind myself, and I think it's important to remember just generally, that this wasn't a mainstream sort of approach to religion at the time. At least not that I was aware of as a 17-year-old.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. The movie itself. So the wildest thing to me about this movie is the casting. Because, like, if going into this movie,
incredible cast.
Imagine going into this movie blind and then Selma Hayek showing up halfway through.
Fucking Alan Rickman?
Yeah.
Like,
this has some of the most conceptually funny casting. I would argue Chris Rock as Rufus the Apostle, and he's just Chris Rock.
He's just Chris Rock.
Funny
because that's all. I mean, at this time, Chris Rock has gotten better at acting.
Yeah,
but like at this time, he was just Chris Rock, and he has some pretty bad deliveries in this movie. But like, it is extremely funny. Just
Ben
have
Affleck,
Chris Rock as Chris Rock. Yeah, sorry.
Ben Affleck and Matt Damon as angels is conceptually funny to me because they're just two bros.
They
I don't
play
think
it
that
well,
was on
though.
purpose. They play it well. I don't think it was on purpose. Obviously, one of the first things you see is George Carlin as a cardinal, and it's like, oh yeah, of course, that's fucking hilarious.
Yeah,
he's great in it.
That is stunt casting. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, and then of course Alanis Morissette as God. Like you said, the movie is a series of conversations, and I saw like I think the performances aren't like what's her name who plays Bethany? She's not really doing a great job.
Linda Fiorentino.
Linda Fiorentino. She's a good actress. In this, it felt like she wasn't really doing the thing.
She seems real, and Kevin Smith has sort of like hinted around that, but in interviews and such around this time, and then subsequently that they didn't get along, and then obviously she hasn't been back to be in any other Kevin Smith movies, and so like that might have something to do with it. She's not bad in this movie; she's just very, very understated in most scenes.
She doesn't really have much of a character, to be honest.
No,
it's
she
basically
doesn't.
Just everything happens to her,
right?
And that's on the writing side. That's the problem. With the writing.
She just goes from place to place and receives exposition. That's the entirety of her character.
And she never really does much. Like at the end, she does save God, but it takes like it's like the only thing she does, which is a big deal to save God. But she does it like because Jay like puts the idea in her head. Because it starts with God getting beat up, which I would argue, come on, God. Like,
get
your ass kicked.
Can't you do something? Can't you throw lightning bolts or some shit? Getting your ass beat on the Jersey boardwalk?
In the dream sequence of The Sopranos.
Yeah, yes.
Or The Wrestler. I've been there. That's there's a venue called the Stone Pony that's a stone's throw away from that location. Mm-hmm. I pissed right on that boardwalk, right there where God was.
Nice.
Anyway,
on the Jersey Shore.
Yeah, people love that one. It's an abandoned casino in the background. That's what it is, and people love filming there.
Isn't it also in The Wrestler?
Yeah. He goes and meets his daughter there.
Yeah.
So, God gets beat up, and the idea is Jason Lee puts God in a coma so that God cannot. And again, this feels silly because it's like. Really? God doesn't have... God likes to go down and play skee ball, and if he dies in human form, he or she, it's an it. God is an it.
Yeah.
Then God
I think
just goes back to heaven.
I think the intent of that is less that God is an it and more that God is everything.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, God is a they then.
Yeah.
And so God gets put in a coma instead, and it's like, really, God? You can't figure this one out?
But it's fine. Like, I accept it, because this movie...
Yeah, it's fine.
This movie is ultimately just like a fantasy movie.
Yeah, it's silly. It's supposed to be silly.
Yeah.
She says at the end what kind of fucked up deity gets, I forget how she puts it, but it's the same idea of like, what the fuck, God? And so... Basically, Jason Lee convinces these two angels through like sending them a newspaper article that this cardinal is absolving people of their sins automatically because of a rebranding in the church with Buddy Christ and Catholicism. Wow,
it's kind of it's related to the idea of what did they call it? Indulgences. And that's right.
Right.
They call it plenary indulgence in this movie, but
Yeah.
it's basically like if you've ever read history or something, you used to be able to make donations to the church or or just be like the right, like a respected or a person in power or something. The idea was that like you could just go and get indulgences from the church that are basically like get out of jail free cards.
Yeah, which is it's a perfect start to talking about.
Talk about how dogma is bullshit, like dogmatic belief is bullshit, right? Because it's like
yeah, exactly, because
like,
it's a get at a free
right. So you can just like you can just go to like a cardinal and just be like, yeah, all your sins are forgiven, and they're all forgiven. Like really?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's beginning with like this really hypocritical aspect of certain, I guess, denominations of Christianity. I don't think every denomination does this. But it's very pointedly beginning with that like seed of, well, this is really hypocritical, and then all of the film's criticisms and sort of discussions around Catholicism come from that starting point.
Right.
It's a cool idea.
And the two angels see Grant Hicks, Dante's cousin, I believe, who's a news anchor, reporting on this. They're at an airport in a very pre 9/11 scene, because they're in the airport, like
just sitting there, yeah.
Yeah, planning a massacre in an airport, and they realize like, so they're fallen angels. God casts them out, but if they cut off their wings and walk through this church to be absolved and then die, they will get to heaven. They found a loophole, and they will now go to heaven. What they don't realize, and what Jason Lee, the demon Azrael, knows, is that it'll actually undo reality because it proves God wrong. So that's the stakes, and they decide to also plan a massacre because Loki is the god of death, right?
Angel of death, yeah,
Angel of death, Matt Damon, and then Batfleck is just like a preachy ass. He like judges people.
Bartleby, he watches people.
He watches,
yeah.
So he knows everybody's sins, essentially.
Yeah.
So that's the plan. On the way, they stop by Randall, the gun store owner.
Yeah,
which I forgot about.
Oh yeah. Clerks 2 was on the distant horizon at this point.
Yep, it's true. And so Metatron, played by Alan Rickman, shows up to Bethany, who works in an abortion clinic with Janine Garofalo, who's nailing the Kevin Smith dialogue. I would assume. I would say, like, certain actors can't nail the dialogue. I thought Janine was doing a good job.
Oh yeah,
I think Chris Rock
Chris Rock does okay. Jason Lee does really well with it.
Yeah, Jason Lee is a professional. Chris Rock, I think, improvised, and I remember specifically this movie. On the DVD, I'm pretty sure there's a gag reel of this. I remember that Ben Affleck loves to improvise for Kevin Smith, and Kevin Smith every time just goes like, "Okay, well, let's do a second take and say the lines," because Ben Affleck's improv is always the worst. Like, there's a whole Kevin Smith thing about that.
I do remember him talking about, there's a scene in The Town where, like, Ben Affleck's character is just talking about bullshit with one of the other characters at a table in, like, a diner or something. And I think this was on, like, Smodcast or something, where Kevin Smith was just like, I know that was just Ben Affleck doing Mad Libs. Like, I know he just sat there and was like, all right, let's do a fun take with some improv.
The example I remember is he was talking about filming Chasing Amy, and when they're talking about lesbian sex, and she says like, and he's like, what if it's more intimate or something like that, where she suggests the fisting, and Ben Affleck said like, what if you want to get more intimate? What do you punch him in the head? Kevin Smith was just like, okay, cut. What? Like, all right, let's do it again. Like, because Ben Affleck, you can tell he's a guy who thinks he's very funny.
Yeah.
And isn't necessarily that funny.
He really puts that energy into the world. Guy who thinks he's very funny.
Yeah. We've talked about Matt Damon is pretty damn good. I have a conspiracy theory. I never confirmed it, that Loki was originally played by Jason Lee, or supposed to be, because his lines are pure fucking like Brody. Like, his lines are very Jason Lee. When you watch it and you imagine Jason Lee saying the lines.
I could see that, but I think it's also, one, it's a symptom of being written by the same person. They're similar type characters, but Azrael feels really clearly Jason Lee to me.
Yeah.
Like,
he's very Jason Lee as well.
Conceptually, that like I can see Kevin Smith writing that character specifically for Jason Lee.
Right.
It's like, I want to see Jason Lee play a villain this way, so I'm gonna write that character.
Right.
But that is interesting. I could see that. Like, I could see him doing those lines for sure.
Yeah. And they had just done Chasing Amy. That's also why I was thinking about it. So yeah, these two Boston jackasses are on this mission. Metatron tells Bethany she has to stop them. She'll run into two prophets. I would argue that Jay and Silent Bob are a weird presence in this.
They're the strangest elements of the movie. I wanted to talk about Alan Rickman real quick. Alan Rickman is great in this because he's Alan Rickman.
He's great.
But also his dialogue is really good.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about it in the Tusks episode, I think, with Michael Parks, where there's just Kevin Smith often gets critiqued for being overwritten or like too wordy. But there's certain characters and certain tones that I never really noticed until we started doing the show that he gets really well. And like Michael Parks' character in Tusk is a perfect character for him, it turns out, this like spooky horror guy. And then like Alan Rickman playing this eternal angel who's wise but also a little weary, but he's also speaking with authority. Like, he really nails this dialogue. It seems so perfectly natural, and not just because Alan Rickman is such a good actor, but that's a lot of it. But like the dialogue itself is written really well for this character. It's a really good character. Yeah,
I would say all the biblical characters, they all feel like they're people who've worked somewhere for a long time.
Yeah.
And are like kind of exhausted.
Yeah.
I love the line where he's talking about if you heard the voice of God, your chest would explode and your head would cave in. Because we went through 5 Adams before we figured that one out. That's a great line.
Such a good joke. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course there's that story about how once Alan Rickman got cast, Kevin Smith took Jason Mewes aside and like told him like, listen, this is a movie now.
Yeah, you can't fuck around. Your best behavior.
Yeah. And then Jason Mewes proceeded to memorize the script.
Yep. The entire script.
Because it is like Jason Mewes acting in a scene with Alan Rickman is fucking bizarre.
That is bananas. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. George Carlin being in this, like, because obviously George Carlin and Kevin Smith have a relationship after this, but it's just like, wow, it's George. Same with Chris Rock. These are all people from like different worlds, and it's like Dogma is the first like you made it movie for Kevin Smith. I would argue, where he's pulling like serious actors and
people
comedians
that aren't just like, because for the most part, Clerks, Mallrats, there's a couple of exceptions in Mallrats, and Chasing Amy.
It's his buddies.
They're people he knows. Yeah, like Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, they're big stars, but they're also his friends.
Yeah, he gave them their career.
Yeah, so he's just pulling his friends, and this was sort of, you're right, it's the first sort of, I've arrived, here's my big casting flex.
Right.
This cast is nuts. Yeah.
It's nuts. And it's watching the two, like, these two groups interact. Getting to see Hooper in the
Hooper X,
club.
in the strip club, yeah.
And then Selma Hayek, like interacting with Jay and Silent Bob is so I never get over that imagery where I was like, that's fucking weird. And so it's basically, like we said, a series of conversations. At the end, they figure out that God is in the body of, what's his name, Bud Cort. Is
Bud
that
Cort.
his name?
Yeah, Bud Cort.
Yeah. Harold from Harold and Maude. And and God shows up as Alanis Morissette and explodes. Loki gets killed by Bartleby, and then she explodes the head of Bartleby.
Yep.
I have a question. Where did they go? Did Loki go to hell?
I think they went to heaven.
Well, so Loki must have, because Loki didn't get I think you're right, because at the end he says thank you to her, to God, and so it implies that she is forgiving.
She is forgiving them, yeah. But
Loki at least spent like 5 minutes in hell, right? Because
maybe
because he gets killed
after he's done a whole lot of murder. Well, presumably,
and he didn't walk through.
We're not sure if he's murdered anyone at that scene.
He certainly murdered people.
He certainly murdered people earlier. Yeah, that's true. movies. And then he also shoots Scott Mosier in the head on the bus.
Yep. He sure does. So he definitely, Scott Mosier's cameo.
Yeah.
The movies scene is that scene is intense.
It was always intense, but it's even more intense now. Like, it's like, man, this is like,
because again, it's spree shooting shit. It's pre 9/11 and it's not pre Columbine, but it definitely is like
it was written
when we knew that gun
before
violence.
Columbine. But it's very right wing because they're executing people for sins against God, and I mean it's meant to be.
For the record, they're the villains.
I was going to say it's meant to be uncomfortable, even though there are jokes in it and it's funny and there's like quotable lines in this scene. But these are the two bad guys. These are the villains.
Yeah. Well, that's my other thing about this movie that's so interesting. This is like the closest Kevin Smith has done to like a mainstream, like almost not superhero, but like this isn't the closest. This is the first time he's done something that's like actiony and adventure and like has bad guys. Like he had bad guys in his other movies, but they were like not murderers. Like this is the first time he has murder in one of his movies.
Yeah. And the bad guys are complex.
Yep.
Like
that's what I was gonna get to.
Yeah, you feel bad for them and you understand where they're coming from. Like even Azrael, like you understand where he's coming from and why he's doing what he's doing.
Azrael basically is in hell.
Yeah.
And he's an ex-muse that is in hell and he hates hell. There's a cut scene that should have been in the movie about hell where he explains what hell is. I'm sure you've seen it, Tom, right?
Yeah, he shows Bethany what hell is like.
Yeah, but the showing part I was always found less interesting. It's the part where he explains that hell used to just be the absence of God. And then once humans started going to hell, they brought all their guilt there and made it a suffering pit. And I thought that was a really cool idea.
It is.
Is that like for the angels, just being not near God was hell alone. And then humans because humans stopped believing in God, so they had to, or they didn't know the presence of God, so they had to make hell like worse. And so the whole point is he'd rather not exist than be in hell.
Yeah.
Is what it comes down to. He's committing suicide.
Yes.
And that it's these are the elements that are like really cool, like really elaborate.
In terms of storytelling, this is really like Kevin Smith always has a good idea of interpersonal stories.
Yeah, but
this is really the first time we get to see him really play around with super complicated ideas of morality and motivation, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The stakes are a lot higher because like before the stakes are just like the sort of woe is me navel gazing, which he's still very good at. Having just watched Clerks 3, he's still very good at that. This is sort of like the first time and I think kind of the only time since then, that he's stepped into sort of, well, maybe not. No, he's done other films.
Well,
like broader than just like, what are the like, I don't know what I'm trying to say exactly, but this film represents a significant growth for him, not just as a filmmaker and as a person who can populate his movies with impressive casts, and not just as a writer, but like as conceptually and a storyteller. I think this is a significant movie for him.
Yeah, which is interesting considering what we're going to compare it to. I would see, because watching just violence in Kevin Smith movies is weird enough. Here's what I think he was going for. I think this movie is supposed to be biblical in its plot, in the sense that it's supposed to play out like a story in the Bible, like a fable. And so like their motivations feel like kind of simple, and there's massacres, there's betrayal, like there's all these elements that are very biblical, and the point is to show that they're also very human. And I think that's the idea, it's again to bring humanity to the stories of the Bible, to be like, look how human they're being, playing out this biblical scale story.
It's Yeah,
his argument is like that's how it always was. The Bible was written by people who made these characters, these people out to be more dramatic and well spoken than they were. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like Paradise Lost. Like Paradise
Yeah.
Lost humanizes the devil. And like when you read that story, you're like, oh shit, I get it. Like I get what his beef was. I get why he did what he did.
Right.
And this movie is doing the same thing.
Yeah. And that is probably the best appeal for Jay and Silent Bob being in it. That said, it's still weird because
It's
you
so
need
weird
context.
that they're there. Yeah.
It doesn't fit in the View Askew universe. That's the thing about this movie, is that it's very, like, if you read the Jay and Silent Bob comics, they work this into it. They show, like, the adventure that Jay and Silent Bob was on before they got into Dogma. It actually ends with them literally in a parking lot, and they hear someone scream, and they run off. But it still never felt like it belonged. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a weird detail that Jay and Silent Bob... The thing that saves it is that only Jay and Silent Bob are aware of it. They're like R2-D2 and C-3PO in that regard. But it's always so weird. Like, they could have just been... Like, I like the idea of the prophets being these really flawed idiot stoners. But the fact that they're like these characters who have so much lore around them always felt weird.
Yeah. It's like having... Not exactly, but it would be like having Spider-Man in the movie.
Yeah, in a way. I think if you watch this movie without the context of them, it would still make sense.
It still works,
But there'd be
yeah.
moments where you go, what the hell? It also has one of my favorite plant and payoffs. It's so childish, but the part where they really think Bethany's going to fuck them, and then he negotiates her down to, let's say we have 5 minutes to live, the world is ending, would you fuck me? And she's like, sure, whatever. And then they let you forget about it for the longest time. And then the world is literally going to end in 5 minutes. And Jay whisks her aside. And it's like, all right, let's do this.
Yeah, let's do this.
And he's like, he's never forgotten. That's all he wants.
Yeah,
it's his main goal.
It's been thinking about it the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a very, very good payoff, I thought.
I think free of the context of the rest of the Kevin Smith movies, they do work within this film. You don't need any addition. I mean, Silent Bob is odd, but like you don't.
Yeah, he's the weirder of the two, honestly.
Yeah, you're surrounded by such fantastical characters that it hardly registers. I think. So I think being more familiar, the more familiar you are with Kevin Smith's movies, the stranger Jay and Silent Bob's presence in the movie is.
Yeah. But it also was a delight to watch like Chris Rock interact with Jason Mewes. That shit is so weird to watch.
With Alan Rickman.
It's fun.
Jason Mewes doing scenes with Alan Rickman.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Yeah.
It's so goddamn weird. I loved this is an aside, that when he says they're there because of John Hughes, and she's like 16 Candles, John Hughes, and he just goes, you know that guy too? That fucking guy. That's such a weird line.
Yeah, it really is.
They also later insult Home Alone, which is a John Hughes film.
Yes.
That's a weird running theme.
I don't know.
I don't know what that means.
I don't think it means it. I think it's just a running gag.
Yeah. I want to note that this movie, I believe, Da Vinci Code's before the Da Vinci Code, right?
The idea that Bethany is a descendant of Jesus?
Yeah, which I'm sure didn't start with this movie either.
No, they've played... I mean, there's elements of it in Scorsese's Last Temptation of Christ.
Yeah.
There's other... and I know that wasn't the first time that idea came around.
Yeah.
But I guess so. Yeah, maybe a little bit.
I don't know. I have stray notes. Again, Ben Affleck is never not funny as an angel to me. When he like whips out his wings and stuff, I just can't not see Ben Affleck going to donkeys. You know, I can't.
It's funny because he is good in this movie. Like,
yeah, he is, but he's still Ben Affleck.
He's still Ben Affleck, but he does like he has one of the most compelling arcs in the movie where he starts out.
Yeah,
you're on his side totally. He's totally sympathetic to humans. He makes every time he speaks, he makes total sense, and then he has a turn partway through the movie. And it's earned. Like, the turn is earned.
It is. He just loses his fucking mind.
He just fucking loses it. And he's so... Yeah, and so he becomes just this relentless murderous villain in the final act, and it makes total sense, and he plays it very well.
What's interesting about this movie is that most of the characters could have their own movies. I could watch a whole movie about two bored angels on Earth.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Then that's how it starts. That's what I really like about the way they depict their characters, and it's so interesting because it's Kevin Smith, but it works. Which is that Kevin Smith depicted again all the angels and stuff as bored employees, which is something that he is familiar with. He made Clerks. Like, it's no different than Clerks, but it works because the idea is that these characters have lived for fucking, thousands of years.
Yeah, and you're a cog in a machine that you can't totally understand because you can't see the entirety of it. It's just this circuitous, dense, obfuscating entity that you are in service to. And you're right, it does translate super well. I never thought about that.
The Dogma part where it's like stupid rules that don't make sense. Everything is, silly and dumb. Like, it really translates, it's both like the weirdest Kevin Smith movie and yet extremely fitting.
I mean, I think it's his best movie, probably, right?
It's his best movie. I think most people would say that. The final detail I just really love is Bethany stepping on Jay to talk to God. I don't know why. I love that they include the shot to make sure we know that she steps on Jay. Also, it's really weird that God impregnates her. I know that's very biblical, but I'd be mad.
Yeah, because I had plans.
Right, and she works at a clinic. Is God going to help out raise the kid? Is God going to give her money?
God going to send me some child support?
Right. I would imagine that they're probably looking out for her, but I'd still be like, come on, give me let me win the lottery or something.
Can you hook me up? Yeah. Can I get yeah.
You impregnated me, Alanis Morissette.
Yeah.
It's fucking weird.
It's like Janosch and Ghostbusters too.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there'll be many perks like free parking.
Yeah, exactly.
There are many perks to being the mother of a living God.
Yep. I gotta watch that.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet.
Yeah. But yeah, I think this is his best movie, right?
I think so. Well, probably. It's been interesting revisiting a lot of these and then seeing some of them for the first time. Like, I never expected to like Tusk as much as I did.
Yeah.
But Tusk really fucking works.
Yeah. And now that we're at the part where we talk about how it'll compare, right? Are we at that part?
Yes, I assume so.
I would argue that Red State is also a growth moment in the director. It's also probably his next most violent film. Like this, until Red State, I think Dogma was his most violent film. And so it's bloody, it's different, it's and of course it has to do with...
It's also about dogmatic belief.
Exactly. It has to do with dogmatic religious belief and coming down on it, and coming down on acts of biblical smite, like the Moobie's massacre versus what happens in Red State. It comes down on being anti-gay. It comes down on like human attempts to like wield God as a weapon for their own purposes.
Yeah. So they do. And I swear we're not doing this on purpose. We're starting at opposite ends and just moving inward. So yeah, this actually I think is really gonna match up. And Red State's a movie I haven't seen in 10 years. Like I saw it when it came out, and it's been since then. So just based on my fuzzy recollection of it, I really do think like these two are gonna line up in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think so.
Which is so interesting that like so many of his movies have lined
up. Yeah, it's
up.
like he planned it.
Even the ones that we didn't expect would. Yeah. We're like, there's no way. And then we watch them like, oh, actually, they do connect in a lot of weirdly thematic ways.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, if you take a further step back, it's not that strange because it's all coming from the same filmmaker. And he's obviously, he's thinking about the same couple of themes for the past 20 years. It's been just what he's been making movies about.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like matching up Tarantino films where it's like, yeah, it's Tarantino. He makes similar films. He has the same bullshit on his mind, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's just Kevin Smith films are they're oddly diverse when you stand back from them too, about what they're about. Like, obviously, like Mallrats and Clerks are on the same wavelength, but then like Chasing Amy, that's not a hanging out movie. That's not a slacker movie.
No.
And then Dogma is way the fuck out there. Like he jumps around. Jay and Silent Bob, that's going to be like an adventure movie. That thing's going to be out of control. That's like his grand opus, right? That was when he was on top of the world, and literally he had to turn away people to be in that film, which I always thought was interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah,
there's a cut scene of Adam Carolla, which I'm like, good cut, Kevin Smith.
Yeah, way to anticipate that one.
Yeah.
And that was also supposed to close out the View Askew universe. Like, he wasn't supposed to do any more with Jay and Silent Bob or anything after that, but obviously he didn't do that.
There's a Easter egg about that, which is that at the end when Alanis Morissette closes the book, it's only bookmarked halfway through. So that was his way of being like,
maybe.
We'll see.
Yeah, maybe.
And then he immediately was like, yes, we're going to keep going.
Oh, also, there's I had meant to bring this up earlier, but you just mentioned Alanis Morissette again, so I'll bring it up again. Initially, the thought was that it was going to be Emma Thompson that would play God.
Oh, shit.
Because she's friends with Alan Rickman. And Alan Rickman, from what I've read in interviews with Kevin Smith, came to Kevin Smith and was like, look, we could get her. Like, I could get her to be in this, do the cameo for it. And it wound up falling through, I think because she was pregnant.
Oh, that's fair.
And couldn't do it.
Nobody wants a pregnant God.
Well, it would be making a specific statement, I think. And also she does like cartwheels and standing on her head and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
and pregnant people are gross.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. That's fucked up that it would be her. I love Alan Rickman is such a team player, where he's just like, oh yeah, I'll do this. You want me to wear this dickless prosthetic? Sure.
I don't give a shit. You want to? Yeah. They put the wings on it, and I think he talked about that, but I definitely read Kevin Smith talking about it. The wings fucked his back up bad.
Damn.
Because it's like,
I know they originally had prosthetic wings more, and they did more digital work than they thought. Like when Ben Affleck is flying down, that was originally the fake wings, and they said it looked hilarious, so they had to CGI it because they didn't move, so it just looked like he was being lowered, which is what was happening.
Which is what is happening. Yeah, the wings were like, they look great in the scene where Alan Rickman reveals his wings. They look incredible.
Yeah.
But
they're
it's
huge.
They're huge. They're this complicated harness with a bunch of pulleys that are being operated by more than one person. And it's just ripping his back up.
Yeah, poor Alan Rickman.
Yeah, you can kind of see it on his face too.
Right.
He's like, this sucks, but I'm holding this expression.
Yeah. I bet the most annoying person on set for Alan Rickman was Kevin Smith. Because, he'd be the one asking him about Die Hard and shit, right?
Yeah.
That would be the one. Everybody else would try to be on their best behavior, but...
Yeah, and that's what Jason Mewes said, according to Kevin Smith, was, he told him, you can't snoochie boochies around. This is fucking Alan Rickman. This is a real movie. So he went and learned the whole script, and then Kevin Smith takes him aside. He's like, what did you do that for? He's like, I didn't want to piss off that Rickman guy.
So I think this is part of the charm of Kevin Smith movies and watching them, is that Jason Mewes is a stoner.
Yeah.
From New Jersey.
He is just that character.
Yeah, when I went to New Jersey, I actually ran into an old girlfriend of Kevin Smith, and she was telling me about his childhood, and he did not have a good childhood. His mom and his family was not. It wasn't great. He's just a street kid, and then just watching this street kid have this rags to riches, getting to do scenes with George Carlin and Ben Affleck.
You mean
and
Mewes,
Alan
right?
Rickman. Mewes, yeah.
Okay. Just to clarify.
Yeah. And it's wild. And then, of course, the heroin stuff that happened later and the fact that he's clean now is just whether or not you like Kevin Smith stuff, whether or not Jay and Silent Bob appeal to you as characters. Again, Jay is definitely a misogynist character. Watching this one with Hannah, she was talking about the thing that she noticed that I wanted to relay is it's the character of Jay is okay. It's the fact that no one gets to really there's no women who get to like dunk on him or like reply to what he says.
Right,
they just sort of roll their eyes, and that's it.
Yeah, he's supposed to be the fool, but there's not enough of... It's sort of like kind of what... Kevin Smith is nowhere near as bad, but it's sort of like what happened with Cartman over the years on South Park.
Yeah, exactly.
Where they forgot to have somebody point out that he's fucking wrong, or that he's talking out of his ass.
Yeah.
But it's not as bad with...
It's not as egregious because Jay isn't going off on the Jews.
Yeah, and in later films, Jay does get dunked on. Like
he does. He does a little bit in this.
A little bit in this one, but I think this is a dated aspect of it. But like Linda Fiorentino treats him like a child throughout the movie. Yeah, because that's all he's worth.
Right.
It's more pronounced in like Jay and Silent Bob Reboot or like Clerks 2, where like it is very obvious that Jay is supposed to be the fool.
Right, and also that's one of the benefits of the reboot is they do the thing where it's like this young group of women are like, "Fuck you, man."
Yeah, like what the hell is this guy?
Yeah, where like he does bring in that element of like Jay is out of his time, and the young people are like, "You can't say that shit. That's fucked up."
Yeah.
So yeah, they get there. Fuck.
I don't know what else we got to say. Yeah.
I feel like
we've talked for half the length of the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, this was like a stream of consciousness. I feel like.
There's only like 2 sections to this show, right? Segments?
Oh yeah, but like you know what I mean is when we talk about Kevin Smith, we just sort of gush about the things we like. I don't know. That's true. This was definitely an interesting podcast. We're very good, Tom.
We're very good. We're the best, Dave.
Yeah. You know who else is the best?
Who's that?
At Nerd Numbers. Thank you, At Nerd Numbers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We obviously we're enjoying this. We're any excuse to watch Kevin Smith films. It's kind of Kevin Smith films are kind of like weird comparison. They're like the Back to the Future films where it's like I've seen them enough times that I don't need to see them again. Yeah. So it's nice rewatching them.
It's like the Indiana Jones movies for me.
Yeah,
but
that's a good comparison.
The experience I'm having going back through this is I hadn't revisited a lot of these movies in a decade or more. And some like Tusk that I'd never seen before, flat out. So I think one of the more interesting parts of doing the show for me has been to go back and revisit these movies. Because I had sort of written them off in my mind as being like, oh, this was a period, when you were high school and a young adult in his early 20s. These are the movies that you were watching, but like they're super. You've outgrown these movies, so it's been interesting to go back and watch them and realize, oh, these are actually pretty good.
Yeah,
like most of them are pretty good. They still hold up in a lot of ways.
Yeah. They held up more than
I expected
from this time.
More than I expected. Let me
put this back to back with American Pie.
Ugh. I watched American Pie like longer than maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but that movie is abominable.
That movie's a villain.
That movie is a felony.
Yeah. Oh man. All right. Well, Nerd Numbers, thank you.
Thank you.
This was through our Patreon, patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. If you go on there, if you spend $5 a month, just $5 of your dollars, you get access to 4 different podcasts. Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and Spiel Boys. We're brimming with those podcasts. There's a bunch of backlogged. There's always new ones every month, sometimes weekly. There's a lot to offer there for just $5 a month. We also have tiers where you can get custom podcasts, which is what you're listening to now. Custom We Just Watched episodes. There's a bunch of stuff. We watch movies every Friday night with our patrons. We're doing it. We're doing it. We're living the dream. Come join our dream.
Yeah. Admit one to our dream.
Yeah.
We also have a store. Head over to gamefullyunemployed.com where you can find a link to our Teespring store where we have all kinds of cool original artwork and designs you can get on t-shirts, mugs, stickers, posters, all sorts of things. So slap your angelic peepers onto that website.
And check out the Bible. The Bible.
No.
I've never read it, but I hear a lot about it.
Nor have I.
Yeah, I'm not going to read the Bible.
I'm not doing that. Look at it. It's long.
Yeah, look at it. It's the least appealing looking book. Like,
Paper's
just visually
weird.
speaking.
What's
Yeah.
up with the paper they print Bibles on? What the fuck is up with that paper?
It's like tissue paper.
It's like tissue
weird.
paper, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel I'm supposed to wrap fucking salami in this paper.
Yeah.
What is this
that's a good idea.
paper?
Yeah, I don't get it. Not for me.
Give it some of that glossy ass paper that they use on comic books and graphic novels and shit. Then I'll read
Yep.
it.
Or pop-up book.
There it is. There
Yep.
it is. Yeah, that's the key.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Noise, smoking weed, doing coke, drinking beers.